Aleph, 102a. Right at the top of the page. Turn our bottom. The rabbi is taught to masker bias the chavera al hasecher la'asis mezuzah. The obligation to put up a mezuzah, and again, a mezuzah here means the scroll that we put on a door, not the doorpost, which is also called a mezuzah, is the obligation of the renter. When the renter leaves, he should not leave, he should not take the mezuzahs with him. However, from it, if a non-Jew is going to be moving in next, so then then he does take the mezuzahs and leave. There was a story of somebody who removed the mezuzah. He ended up burying his wife and his two kids. So the Gemara says, 1 second, if there was a non-Jew taking over, the Bride says it's permitted to take down the mezuzah. So the Gemara says, the story is contradictory. So the Gemara says, it's talking about where there was a Jewish family moving in afterwards. So then he was not supposed to be taking down the mezuzah. He did it anyway. And therefore his two sons died, and his wife and two sons died. Okay. Fertilizer belongs to the owner of the property, and the renter only has the fertilizer, the ash of the oven and the stovetop. Now, the zevel in the Mishnah presumably is menorah. The fertilizer referred to as menorah, and the other fertilizer is ash that is kept by the renter. So the Gemara says, what exactly is the scenario? The courtyard was rented out to the renter, and moreover, the seicher, and the ox belonged to the renter. So the renter rents not just a house, but also a couple of acres attached to it. And he brings his own cows, his own animals. So then, and yet the fertilizer still belongs to the owner of the property. So why would that belong to the owner of the property? He rented the field, he brought his own cattle, he should be able to keep the manure. The courtyard was not rented out to the renter. V'turi demasker, and the cattle belonged to the owner. So he only gave the guy the house, not the property connected to it. So the Gemara says, Pshita, well then it's obvious that it should belong to the owner. It's the owner's property and the owner's cattle. So the Gemara says, what happened was he rented out only the property, but not the courtyards. And the manure we're referring to is animals that sort of dropped their manure in his courtyard. They were owned neither by the renter nor by the owner. Okay, and this supports that. In other words, and how does the owner of the property get the manure? Because what we call kinyan chotzer. Kinyan chotzer means, roughly speaking, if something ends up in your property and you're able to keep it. Mm-hmm. That's sort of what we'll detour now to discuss a little more at length. So, Messiah Leila Rav Yosef Rav Chanina. This supports the opinion of Rav Yosef Rav Chanina. To Rav Yosef Rav Chanina, Chatzer Shel Adam Kaina Lo Shalem B'Daitei. A person's courtyard can acquire things for him without his knowledge. Similarly, the manure of the random animals, the wild animals that ends up in his property is the property acquires that manure for the owner of the property who did not rent it out. Meisvei, question. Amar kol metzias she'yavay l'toich hayom tikna li chatzerei. Le'amar klum. If a fellow announces that any mציעא, any item that falls into his property should belong to him, he wants to be kainet, he wants to acquire it, he didn't say anything. So Gemara says this seems to be a stray contradiction to Rabbi Yosef Rav Chanina. Rabbi Yosef Rav Chanina just said kinyan chotzer works, right? If something falls into your property, you acquire it. Then presumably you could make such an announcement. You could say anything that falls on my property today, I'd like to acquire. Why is what he said meaningless? Why can't he acquire that which falls into his property? We're referring to the Bryce is referring to a very specific scenario. A property that isn't watched. So, like we pointed out in the past, Chotzer needs to, in order for a courtyard to acquire things, it must be watched. There must be a secured courtyard. If it's open and exposed, and anyone can walk in and out without any consequence, then it's not protected, and you can't acquire things. So as Yachi Emeseif, if that's the case, let's see the end of the brisa. Yotz l'shem mציעא be'ir, dvar chiyam. 1 second. Yeah. So Rashi explains a few examples of this. There was a rumor that went out that he's got stuff in his property. What happened? According to one version, there was a flood. The river flooded, and then as the flood receded, the fish were deposited on his property. So he had some free fish. Another version of Rashi is that the rumor went out that a deer broke its leg in his property. So in that case, sort of the deer is like stuck on the property, can't really walk around anymore. So he can just take the deer and then slaughter it. Okay. But if his field is not secured, why does it make a difference if we know that there is fish or a deer with a broken foot on his property? Why does that make a difference? Ultimately speaking, the property isn't secured. The property isn't secured. Why can't somebody else go ahead and pick up the fish? He never acquired it. So the Gemara proposes, it could be that once there's that rumor that he has a mציעא, he has these fish or this deer on his property. So now it's considered sort of secured because everybody knows it belongs to him. So that gives us security that he'll be able to get it. Because if nobody knew about it, you can just pick up the fish and go home with it. But once people know, so then people start separating from it, and it's as if his property is a secure property. Meisvei, question. Zevel hayotzim atanam nikirayim. If the fertilizer comes from the oven or the stovetop, kirayim is the ancient version of the stove. Tanner is like an oven used to make pita and lafa, a much hotter oven. Or if somebody collects the manure before it hits the ground, so he literally has a vessel behind the animal and he catches the manure. Okay, we'll get to more specific details about how exactly to do that. Then it belongs to the renter. Okay, that which is in the refes, which is in the chotzer, shabal bayis belongs to the owner. How do they translate refes here? Campus pile or something?
Oh, talked about the vessel attached to the cow's bottom.
No, that's the next one before that. Shiba refes, shiba chotzer.
We know that it's found in the barn and in the courtyard.
The barn. Okay, so refes is a barn. So the barn and the courtyard, that belongs to the owner. The manure that's found there belongs to the owner of the property. So Gemara says, so according to Rabbi Chanina, property can acquire things for you. So as soon as the animal, pardon my description here, as soon as it releases its manure, so then the avir of the property, that means the airspace of the property, acquires it for the owner. The fact that the renter's vessels on the floor in which the manure drops into is irrelevant. And therefore, actually, this manure should not belong to the should not belong to the renter. It should belong to the owner of the property. It's already become his as it fell from the animal. It's his courtyard, meaning the courtyard of the owner. So Amar Abai proposes, he literally affixes a vessel to the rear end of the cattle, and sort of it never falls into the airspace of the courtyard. It immediately falls directly into his vessel. So therefore it belongs to him. Okay. Rava proposes an alternative. Rava says that because this concept that the airspace will acquire the item for you is only relevant when the airspace, when it will ultimately fall into the airspace. Let's explain. So a guy throws something into your property. If it's going to land in your property, you acquire it even before it lands.
Okay.
And that's because it will land in your property. However, let's say he throws into somebody else's vessel. It's on your property, and it will land in his vessel. Then your airspace does not acquire it because ultimately it won't land in your property. So Rava basically argues because there is a vessel, quite literally behind the cow, therefore it will never land in the property, it will land in the vessel, so therefore the airspace is not acquired on your behalf. Okay, now this question of the acquisition of the airspace is a major question that Rava had elsewhere asked. And now the Gemara sort of says, like, Rava asked the question, which is relevant to what he said now, but he accordingly, he could have resolved his own question. Why did he ask the question? Let's explain. So does Rava find it obvious that if something is traveling through a property, but won't land in it, that you don't acquire it? So Rava says definitively, it has to land in your property for the airspace to acquire it. Meaning that if it's traveling through, but it won't land there, like I throw it through the windows of your car, there's no acquisition. But Rava asked it as an open question. Rava asked it as a question. The boy Rava asked, he threw a wallet from one window and it traveled through to the next window and outside, out of the house again. What's the story? Is this? Do we say that because it won't land, therefore we don't consider the airspace significant? Or do we say it doesn't make a difference? Right now it's in his airspace, right? It's traveling between his windows. Therefore it belongs to him. So the Gemara says, the Gemara says there is a distinction. Over here, there's a vessel that blocks the menorah from falling into the property. So therefore, because there's a barrier between the ground and the menorah, so therefore Rava says you don't acquire the menorah. The guy who has the vessel, he acquires the menorah. But if there was no barrier, it was just traveling through, that's what Rava asks it as an open question. Rava's not sure of the answer.
So this would have great implications for an airplane.
Yeah. Talking about airspace here.
Oh.
Okay.
So you talk about airspace here. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a discussion about this once before.
Yeah, we've come across the same question of Avashain Sefla Noach.
Probably
It's
in
also
Shabbos.
it's quite relevant in the laws of Shabbos, whether this is called an Ikir and Hanoch, whether you violate the laws of Haitzal in such a context. Okay. The barn and the courtyard, they belong to the owners. The Mars Tarati, both of them. Obviously, if they weren't included in the rental, obviously you don't acquire it. What is the Bryce need to say both a barn and a courtyard? It means the barn that's in the courtyard belongs to the owner. Yeah. Okay. Meaning that we're talking about it where the courtyard was rented out to the renter. The landlord rented the courtyard. But the barn in the courtyard is not included unless it's specifically mentioned. So if you have a courtyard and you have a barn, in the courtyard, the barn is not included unless it's mentioned. Rav says, we see from here, if somebody rents out his courtyard, he does not rent out the barn. Meisvei, question. Okay, so now we get to the laws of Shiloh Hakan. Right, there's a commandment if you have if you find a nest, then you send away the mother bird. But there's one rule here with the laws of Shiloh Hakan, which is that you have to, it says ki yikara kan tzipor, you have to find it. Meaning as if it's sort of, it wasn't prepared, like you didn't build a nest, because then you wouldn't find it. Similarly, if you own the nest, then you haven't found it. So you don't there's no obligation to send away the mother bird.
Oh.
Can be walking down the street and you.
Right. So chance upon it. Yeah. So for those who like doing this mitzvah of Shul Hakan, some people say is that a person should make a public statement that if there's ever a nest on his property, he doesn't want to acquire it. So then it's not his. And then you can do Shul Hakan if it happens on your property. Okay. But see, here's the details. So it's I'm sorry. These are the pigeons of a shayvach. Shayvach is a nest. V'yene aliyah, the pigeons of an attic. They made a nest in the guy's attic. Chayoves b'shiluach. You're obligated to send away the mother bird. V'asuras begezel nedarka shalom. But yet you're not allowed to steal them because of darka shalom. Because of, even though technically speaking there's no issue of stealing, because there's a certain expectation, we don't allow you to take them without permission. In other words, technically speaking, you can't really steal a bird that's not in a cage, right? Because the bird is not secured, and you can't really own such a bird. However, because of the normal rules of keeping the peace, meaning presumably the birds sleep in the same place every night. So if you feed your birds, then these are your birds, even if they're going to go out every day and they'll fly away and you have no way of catching them. But presumably they'll come back every day, so therefore they're considered yours. Okay. And there you can't steal them because of the sort of breaking the peace. If you hold of the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah, it says that a courtyard of a person can acquire things without his knowledge. So then Kari kan ki kara pratlam zuman. 1 second. According to Rabbi Yehudah, why don't you acquire these birds with kinyan chatzar? And therefore, you should not have the obligation of shiluch hakan because these are birds that are owned. They're mezumah. They're prepared. So why don't you acquire the nest and the chicks and the eggs with kinyan chatzar? So Rav is an interesting scenario. Beitza b'yitzias rubo hudei chayav l'bishluach. So you look at now the mother birds. Obviously, the guy doesn't own because the mother birds are not secured, right? They can go wherever they want, but the chicks and the eggs, those are secured because they can't get anywhere on their own. So Rava says, look, there is a possibility here of shiluch hakan. If the egg is halfway out of the mother, so then there's an obligation of shiluch hakan. You have to send away the mother bird to take the egg, but you don't own the egg yet because it hasn't fell into your property. The mother is still in the middle of laying the egg. When we talk about the obligation to send away the mother bird, it means before the egg lands in your property. Once the egg lands in your property, it's already prepared because you own it. Obviously, the egg can't travel on its own. But before the egg before the egg lands in your property, so then you can send away the mother bird while it's laying the egg and grab the egg. Yeah, exactly. Not too easy to do. Yeah, I once performed the mitzvah shiluch hakan, and you don't get too close to the bird before it runs away. Okay, so the Gemara says, gezel. Why is there a prohibition of gezel, stealing? In other words, the Gemara presumes here that the mitzvah of shiluch hakan is on the eggs, but you're not allowed to steal the eggs. 1 second. Now, accordingly, while the animal is laying the egg, there's no stealing at all because the owner of the property doesn't own the eggs. So what? Right? So if some stranger sees the animal laying the egg and decides to grab the egg from the animal, from the birds, and send them out, grab the egg literally as the mother's laying it, and send away the mother bird. So then there's no gezel. There shouldn't be any stealing because the owner of the property doesn't yet own the egg. So the Gemara says, iman, for the mother bird. Meaning the mother bird you don't own because, like we said, it's not secured. The mother bird can fly around. However, because the expectation is that every night the mother bird comes back, so therefore, because of the laws of keeping the peace, we don't allow you to tempt the mother birds and have the mother bird stay on your property. Meaning the mother, you can feed it or you take the bird and slaughter it. Because the bird is going back to this guy every night, let it be. Don't try to take the bird or attempt it to go to your property. Okay, the Yibai is saying another possibility is the truth of the matter is the stealing has to do with the eggs. One second. Yeah. Okay. And the truth of the matter is that technically speaking, once the egg is halfway laid, more than halfway laid, so then the truth of the matter is there shouldn't be any stealing. Why? Because the owner of the property hasn't acquired the egg. It hasn't been completely laid. However, because the expectation is that an egg that's majority laid is going to end up in the guy's property, as you might imagine, so therefore we say, Darka Shalom, keep the peace and don't take the egg. Even though technically speaking, there would be no prohibition to do so. Okay. Moreover, also this debates and calls man shemer v'tzaleim shemer shalech shalach sa'im b'hodar sabanim tikachlach. According to Rabbi Yehudah, you can't acquire the egg until you send away the mother bird completely, because the verse states, first send the mother bird and then keep the eggs, keep or the chicks. Mm-hmm. 1 second. I feel it could be even a scenario where the egg fell into the courtyard. Okay. So now as follows. According to Rabbi Yehudah, you can't acquire the egg until you send away the mother birds. If you can't acquire the egg, then guess what? Your courtyard can't acquire the egg either. Because as long as you can't acquire it, your courtyard can't acquire it. So therefore, as soon as the mother laid the egg completely, but as long as the mother is on the eggs, then you can't acquire them. So your courtyard can't acquire them either. So that's why you have the obligation of sending away the mother bird. However, there's still Darka Shalom, don't steal it. Okay, so you have Gezel because of Darka Shalom. So Gemara says, if you sent away the mother birds, then Gezel Ma'al Yehu. Then it's as soon as you send away the mother birds, then the guy owns it now.
Right.
So even if it's a stranger that sends away the mother bird, the owner of the property now gets the bird, and gets the eggs because there's no mother bird on it. Mm-hmm. It's straight gazel. If the mother bird was not sent away, so you still can't keep the eggs until the mother bird is sent away. So how could it be that there is stealing? You're not allowed to acquire it in the first place. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara says, we're talking about a child who so in other words, a child who wants to take the eggs when the mother bird is still on the eggs. So the Gemara says, does a cotton have to keep the rules of keeping the peace? The same child is immature. He doesn't understand the rules of keeping the peace. So meaning, if the kid went ahead and took the eggs while the mother bird was sitting on the eggs, because he's a kid, he doesn't really know what he's doing, the father is obligated to return those eggs to the owner of the property. Okay.
So does this mean shulach can only happen in a where there's no ownership,
or any area that's hefker, yeah. Or if you do this thing and you don't want to, if you announce to everybody that you don't want to ever acquire an nest that's in your property, but then it's not, obviously it's not yours, anyone can do it. Yeah, okay. Mishnah. A guy rents a house for a year, a Jewish year, and what happens in Sabra? It became a leap year. So right today we use a standard calendar, so we know in advance which year is a leap year. But before they use the standard calendar, they would actually declare a leap year at the end of Adar. So they didn't know at the time that there would be a leap year. It turns out there's a leap year. Who gets to keep that extra month? So Gemara says it's Abra Seicher. The renter gets the extra month. Let's say it was a month-to-month rental. It's Abra Hashana and it's Abra Lamasker. If there's an extra month, then the owner gets the landlord gets the extra month. There's a story in Tzipar. So they had a sort of two clauses in the contract. It said it's 12 coins a year, 1 coin for each month. So which is that? right? 12 coins a year is a coin per month. They said you split the last month. It's split equally between the landlord and the renter. Okay. So the story contradicts the Mishnah. The Mishnah opens by saying either it's the landlords or it's the renters. And now the story tells us, well, it's actually both of them. We split it. The Mishnah never spoke about such a scenario. The story contradicts the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah is missing some details. This is the detail that the Mishnah is missing. Let's say you had both statements. So you noted the year and the month. 12 coins a year, 1 coin per month. So then you split the extra month. We have a story as well, but in the town of Tzipora, and they said that extra month, because we're not sure what to do, he rented both on a yearly and monthly basis. So therefore we split the extra month. Rav says, if I was there at the time of that story, I would have given the entire benefit to the landlord. Okay, Micah Mashmalon, what exactly is the idea here that Rav is saying? We take his latter statement as more significant, right? So he said 12 coins a year, 1 coin for each month. The second half of the statement means that is the critical one. That means that they're moving on a month-to-month basis. Rav has already said this rule. Rav Huna says that in the place of Rav, they would say Istera Me'amoi or Me'am. Okay, so a guy promises his friend an Istera, to be precise, is a measurement of 96 mol. A mol, I believe, here in the context is a pruta. 1 second. Yeah, Rashi goes through the breakdown here.
Standard copper mall.
Yeah, a mol is a pruta. It's a copper pruta.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 96 prutas in a istera, which is a half a dinar. Okay, so now the guy says two things. He says, "I'm giving you istera mol. I'm giving you an istera, which is 100 mol. Now istera is not 100 mol. Istera is only 96 mol. So Rav says, how much do you owe him? Me'amoy. You have to give him 100 mol. The reason why they're doing this sort of is to get better or worse coins. So if you say Isra Me'amah, you're saying that you want 100 weaker prutais, weaker copper coins, which are worth a little less than 96. So it's actually 100 to an Isra. Let's say the guy says Me'amah Isra. The guy says 100 coins, which are an Isra. Isra, then you only owe me Isra, which is 96 coins. Clearly here we see that Rav takes his latter statement significantly. Rav says that the actual number is determined by the second half of what he says. The Gemara says not necessarily. 1 second. Okay. In other words, if I only had that statement of Rav, I wouldn't necessarily think that it's the critical language is the second, but that the critical language explains the first. Meaning, when he says Isra Me'amai, an Isra, which is 100 ma, he means to say 100 poor mois. He's explaining what he means by Isra. Or if he says Me'amai Isra, what he means is, I'm letting you pay 100 coins, which really is an Isra. Meaning, because if you give me decent coins, then you only have to give me 96. Not that the second thing that he said is more significant. That's where Rav is coming in our Mishnah. He's saying no. Because they said 1 coin every month, that was the second statement he made. The first statement was 12 coins a year. The second statement was a coin per month. So we take the second statement significantly, and we say that if there's an extra month in the year, it goes to the landlord. Shmuel says, we're talking about where this debate happens on the 15th day of this extra month. If they come at the beginning of the month, it all goes to the landlord. If he comes at the end of the month, it all goes to the renter. Okay, meaning if he lives in it 50% of the time, so then he's able to get a 50%. He's able to get a 15% refund. I'm sorry, if he's there 50% of the time, then we split the question 50-50. If he's there all the time, then he gets to keep all of it. If he's there none of the time, he gets none of it. So Gemara says, one second.
The landlord gets none of it.
I'm sorry?
The renter gets none of it.
So if the renter did not live in the property at all,
Okay.
so they can't, they went to court the first day of the month, so then the landlord gets to keep the whole month. If they come at the end of the month, the renter gets the whole month. Come the middle, they get the middle. So Gemara says, one second. Shmuel holds that we take the second statement very seriously. So if we take the second statement seriously, it's 1 coin per month, and the benefit should always go to the landlord because it's 1 coin per month. Extra month means an extra coin. If a guy says, I'm selling you a core for 30 coins, 1 core of wheat for 30 coins. So the way it works is you have to measure out a full core of wheat. So the guy is busy, he puts the pallet on the scale, right? He dumps from the silo into the pallet. And then weighing and weighing and weighing. And as it gets close to a core, the guy says, you know what? I don't think I want to buy it. I'm withdrawing. Yeah. The rule is he's allowed to withdraw because the deal was a full core. And you didn't give him a full core yet. You didn't weigh it out. So the sale is not valid. Okay, what happens if the guy says, and even the last measurement, the last little bit for the core, he can still change his mind. Let's say he says core b'shloishim saw b'sel ani ma'ichalach. He says a core is comprised of 30 saw, and I'm selling you each saw for 1 coin. So similar to the first case, it's the same core for the 30 coins. But here he emphasizes that each 30th is 1 coin. So then, Rishon Kana, as they weigh out saws onto the scale, each saw is another kinyan until you get to 30. Okay. Now, clearly again here, Shmuel is noting that the second statement he makes, which is where he divides the price of the core by the saw, is the significant one. So similarly, why does Shmuel say it depends on when they come to court, whether it's the beginning of the month, the end of the month, or the middle of the month? Shmuel should say the final words he said was 1 coin per month. So therefore, the benefit should always be to the landlords. So Gemara says, "Hasam time amayim shouldn't tofis." Hachanami. 1 second. Okay. So Gemara says that it's okay. In other words, Shmuel actually is not of the opinion of Tofas Lashon that we emphasize the second statement. What happened here is that the fellow who was buying the grain actually took possession of the grain while it was being weighed, and that's what gives him the advantage. That's what gives him the advantage of 1 second.
That's what gives the seller.
Try to work through this here for a second. Okay. So we're talking about where the buyer took possession. Now, if he said to him 30 core, he could change his mind because they haven't completed the sale. If they said, in other words, Shmuel does not hold of Tofas Lashon Achron. He doesn't hold that second statement is significant. He holds sort of it's up in the air. Now, presumably that means that if the buyer took possession of let's say he said let's say they started weighing it out, and he also mentioned the statement of 1 coin for each saw. So then and because the buyer took possession, the buyer has a right to keep what he's taken possession of, and the seller cannot change his mind. Presumably, though, if the buyer hasn't paid yet, the buyer would be able to change his mind, because the operating principle here is tfisa, right? We call Haman Moment al, because he's holding the money, I'll give it to him. So if he wants to change his mind, he could change his mind, because he's holding the money. So he has the option of either keeping the sale or ending it. So in other words, when we say that the guy was weighing out the size, so each saw is an acquisition. It doesn't quite mean that each saw is an acquisition. We don't know if each saw is an acquisition. We're not sure which statement is more important. But to the extent that the seller wants to change his mind, because the buyer is in possession, the seller can't change his mind. Similarly here as well, because you lived on the property for 15 days, so that's sort of grabbing 15 days worth of the property. And therefore, you're entitled to a 50%. Therefore, they split a 50-50.
These measures, so is that a weight or is that a volume?
A volume.
Volume. So how does it get weighed? Talk about weight.
Oh, so yeah, it would be it would to properly wouldn't be weighed. It would be measured in a container. Okay. 1 second. Rav Nachman says that property remains in the domain of the landlords. In other words, the Mishnah. So in other words, he's saying that you get the landlord gets the extra coin. Well, that means that he takes the second statement significantly, and that's the same as Rav. So no. To the contrary, he doesn't take. It's not the statement that's significant; it's the property. Meaning, even if the guy says, I'm renting the property for 1 coin per month, 12 coins per year. According to Rav, actually, it would go to the renter, because the last thing he said was 12 coins a year. But according to Nachman, the key is the property remains in the possession of the landlord. And therefore, in that scenario, the landlord would also get the extra coin. Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, good day.
That's fast. That's a lot.